Welcome to the Explainer. So, if you've ever felt that sudden pit in your stomach when you're handed a giant stack of school registration paperwork, well, trust me, you are definitely not alone. Today, we're diving right into the official guidelines to decode the Oregon school enrollment process together. Let's get right into it.
Because that is the million-dollar question, isn't it? What do they actually need? We all know that classic bureaucratic anxiety that creeps in right before the school year starts. You just want your kid to have a smooth start, but navigating district requirements can feel, honestly, like trying to put together a puzzle when you're missing half the pieces. Well, today we are going to solve that puzzle. We're looking straight at the source, Oregon's official enrollment guidance, to figure out exactly what schools need from you, what they absolutely don't, and how to get the whole thing handled efficiently.
Here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The enrollment basics. 2. Proving residency and age. 3. The immunization rules. 4. Know your enrollment rights. And 5. Tips for a smooth start. Let's jump in.
Section 1. The Enrollment Basics.
So, while enrollment requirements might vary just a tiny bit depending on your specific district or the grade level, the core expectations, they're remarkably consistent across the entire state. This is your standard checklist. First up, schools need proof of the student's age. Usually that's a birth certificate. Next, they need proof of residency in the district, assuming your district requires it, of course. Third, they absolutely need immunization records or a valid exemption. You're also going to need to provide emergency contact information and, if your student is transferring, their previous school records. They might also ask for some basic health info just to make sure they can support your students safely on campus.
Now, this is really interesting. The Oregon guidance offers a very specific protection regarding Social Security numbers. Some districts might ask for one on their intake forms, but listen to this. Lacking a Social Security number is never a barrier to entry. It's not always required, and more importantly, it cannot ever be used to unlawfully block a student's access to school. You have rights here, and the state's top priority is just getting students into the classroom.
Moving right along to Section 2, Proving Residency and Age.
Public school attendance is usually tied directly to where the student lives, right? Well, the state guidance actually recognizes two main pathways to proving this. On one side, you have standard housing. This is your typical utility bill, lease agreement, or mortgage statement. Easy enough. But Oregon also deeply recognizes that housing isn't always standard. For families experiencing homelessness or housing instability, maybe you're in temporary housing, shelters, motels, or living doubled up with another family, you still have a clear, absolute right to enroll. You do not need the exact same documentation as housed families to get your child into a classroom. Both of these paths lead to valid, legal school enrollment.
And this quote, straight from the source material, captures Oregon's protective stance so beautifully. It says, schools must be careful not to create barriers that exclude eligible students. The state mandate is crystal clear here. A lack of standard, immediate documentation regarding housing or age should never unlawfully block an eligible student from accessing their education. Schools are actually directed to work with families to remove these barriers, rather than letting bureaucracy hold things up. And hey, speaking of age, a birth certificate is definitely the easiest route, but if you don't have one, districts are actually required to accept other records.
Okay, but what if you're transferring from another state or country, and those previous school records, report cards, or special ed plans are just missing in action? Honestly, don't panic. Missing prior records will not stop enrollment. Schools can often place a student provisionally while you, or the school, track down those files. Basically, they want to get your student seated and learning while the paperwork catches up in the background.
All right, let's head into Section 3, the immunization rules.
Let's look at this specific academic year, 2025 to 2026. The guidance states boldly and clearly that for this school year, Oregon school immunization requirements remain completely unchanged. So whatever you needed to know last year is exactly what you need to know this year. You are expected to provide a completed certificate of immunization status for each child.
Now, the absolutely crucial point here is understanding exactly whose rules you're following. You've got Oregon state rules on one side and federal recommendations on the other. Oregon manages its immunization rules strictly at the state level. They are entirely independent of federal recommendations. This means you can't simply just look up a national vaccine schedule and assume you're good to go. You really must rely on Oregon's specific state-level guidance for your student to be allowed into elementary, middle, high school, and even preschool and certified childcare programs.
To manage all this data, Oregon utilizes something called the Alert Immunization Information System. This is a statewide tool. So schools, whether they're public, private, charter, or alternative, as well as childcare facilities, are required to track immunizations and report to local public health authorities. The alert system is essentially the digital backbone they use to easily and quickly verify your students' records.
Now, you might be wondering, what if your family requires an exemption? Oregon does allow them, but there's a very precise process. For non-medical exemptions, the state requires families to complete specific vaccine education. For medical exemptions or accommodations, you've got to coordinate directly with your healthcare provider and the school nurse to make sure all the medical documentation is totally accurate. But, and this is a really vital caveat to note from the guidance, even with a valid exemption on file, exempt students may still be excluded from school temporarily during a targeted disease outbreak.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Know Your Enrollment Rights. Because bureaucracy can be super intimidating, it is deeply important to know exactly what protections the state guarantees for you and your child. Oregon public schools are legally mandated to provide access to education, and they must apply enrollment rules fairly across the board. Schools absolutely cannot use residency status, immigration status, or concerns about privacy as improper barriers to deny access to a student. This is a massive relief for families who might be new to the state, newly arrived in the country, or living in unstable housing conditions. The bottom line, your child has a right to be in that classroom.
I actually love this direct quote from the state's guidance because it really empowers you as a parent or guardian. It says, if a school asks for something you do not have, it is reasonable to ask whether another document can be used. Seriously, never let a missing form discourage you from initiating the enrollment process. If they ask for a specific utility bill and you only have a bank statement, ask them if it works. If they want a birth certificate and you only have a passport, just ask. Advocate for your student, knowing the state actively wants schools to be flexible to ensure access.
And finally, let's wrap things up with Section 5, Tips for a Smooth Start.
We've covered the rules, now let's build your practical toolkit so you can prepare efficiently and avoid any of those fun last-minute delays. Here are 4 highly actionable steps you can take right now, long before you ever step foot in a front office. Step 1. Track down that birth certificate or alternative age record and grab your proof of address. Step 2. Call your healthcare provider today and request those immunization records early. Seriously, do not wait for the August rush. Step 3. Prepare a physical folder. Just a simple manila folder with these documents printed and ready saves so much back and forth time with the school secretary. And Step 4. If your family is experiencing a housing change or lacks stable housing, contact the district immediately so they can trigger those protections we talked about earlier. If you happen to be planning a move into Oregon from out of state, the best advice is just to be proactive. Contact your new district before you even pack the moving truck. Ask them what specific documents they want, find out if they offer online enrollment, or ask if they have a new family checklist. Catching these little details early can smooth out the entire transfer process and guarantee your student is sitting at their desk on day 1 without any administrative headaches.
Navigating school enrollment in Oregon is fundamentally designed to be accessible. And now you have the exact blueprint. You understand your rights, you know the housing protections, and you're crystal clear on the immunization rules. But gathering the paperwork is really just the logistics, right? The real magic happens after the forms are filed. So, as you gather that paperwork, consider this. If we completely remove the friction of enrollment, how much faster can your student dive into the actual business of learning this year?